Of Amnesty International, who's the Deputy Director for Eastern Africa, is right here in studio. Thank you so much for making time. Let's just pick off from what you were saying earlier on about the Amnesty International report.
Yes, so our report talks about various things. One, there is the issue of arbitrary arrests. People are picked up on the streets, people are picked up in many places and disappeared without a trace. Their families can't find them, their lawyers can't find them, and all of that, and they're held for long periods of time. Two, when they are taken to these detention facilities, they are subjected to horrendous acts of torture. As you read in your lead here, people are beaten, people are electrocuted, they are shocked with electricity. Three, they are denied food, and in some extreme cases, they are held incommunicado from their lawyers, and they are held without access to the outside. They can't even exercise. These are things that the South Sudan government needs to attend to. They've been going on for a long time. This is not something that started yesterday. The conflict has been on since December 2013, close to 5 years now, and torture, arbitrary detentions have become a hallmark. They've become a feature, a key defining feature of this conflict.
Why are you coming in right now, perhaps, especially since Riek Machar and Salva Kiir have actually decided to make amends and actually prosper forward? Is there hope that this arbitrary arrest and torture and being held incommunicado might actually come to an end, since there's perhaps a sign of good tidings from the leadership in that country?
Well, that is our hope. That is what we hope will happen. You remember that these violations haven't started yesterday. It's been years of continued human rights violations and crimes against humanity. Already you have more than 1,000 people killed. You have more than 1 million displaced and who have had to flee the country and cross into other countries to seek safety. So there's been a whole catalogue of human rights violations taking place. Now that things seem to be on the up, and that is yet to be tested fully, we need to see a situation where there is accountability for these crimes and people who are in detention are released immediately.
Okay, that's very important. But there seems also to be a chain of reaction, not just in South Sudan. Recently in Uganda, we saw one of the members of parliament, famously known as Bobby Wine, actually go through what is said to be torture, Now, is this a chain of events that is happening across Eastern Africa? And how, as the Amnesty International, do you plan on addressing such cases?
We speak up, we address these issues wherever they occur. Uganda as well, we've issued multiple statements calling on the authorities in Uganda to ensure that these politicians and other people's rights are respected. But then your bigger question is there a trend taking place in the region? And I think sadly the answer is yes. The more we see a retraction from democratic norms, the more we see leaders entrenching themselves and trying to cling to power, the more we see human rights violations taking place. All these human rights violations take place not in a vacuum, but within a certain construct that leaders feel that they need to repress people's human rights in a bid to elongate their stay in power, which is misguided and shouldn't be happening.
Well, it definitely shouldn't be happening. Talking about democracy, the rule of the people, by the people, for the people, in contrast to authoritarian rules. And this is something that might come up in very many cases, especially in Africa. Amnesty International, I'm sure you work hand in hand with human rights activists in various countries. Perhaps the role of human rights activists in actually making sure that the rights of various people, especially perhaps in South Sudan and what we've talked about in Uganda, is actually put on the forefront in a case that we don't see rights of individuals being put on the backdrop. Yeah.
So all governments pay lip service to human rights, and no leader will ever sit in public and tell you that for me, I want to be a dictator. But tendencies start to emerge, and you start to see repression of human rights and people's voices being silenced. You see it all the way from you could start from Eritrea and go all the way to Eastern DR Congo, where at the moment you have youth leaders trying to advocate for proper, fair and transparent elections, and every time they head out to the streets to voice their legitimate grievances, they are met with excessive force. So at Amnesty, we are a movement of 7 million people who try to work with everyone, all like-minded people, to ensure that human rights are at the center stage. Everyone who takes injustice personally, we can work with to try and put human rights at the forefront. Whether it is a peace process in South Sudan, whether it's an election in DRC, whatever, we need to make sure that all these are participatory processes that, with human rights respect at their core.
Well, that's very true. Let's focus on South Sudan now. The peace process between the two leaders, Riek Machar and as well as the opposition leader, I mean, what should we expect, especially what you're trying to push as Amnesty International? Can we see those detainees being freed right now, especially since you've released your report? Is there a statement from the government or the opposition in terms of upholding human rights?
Yes, so to give credit where it's due, the South Sudan government has released about 30 political prisoners, but their definition of political prisoners seems to be too narrow, and they've only released the senior leaders of the opposition, SPLM, who have been at the round table with them to discuss how to move the peace process forward. But there are many people who've been detained as part of this conflict.
What numbers are we looking at?
We are looking potentially at hundreds. So in South Sudan, you have a situation where the National Service, which is the intelligence agency, and the intelligence service have picked up people over time for perceived political leanings, meaning that they support the opposition, but also for their ethnic affiliation, mainly because they speak the Nuer language and it is associated with the opposition leader, Riek Machar. They get picked up, they're disappeared. Now, what we are hoping will happen going forward is that the South Sudan government will, first of all, set people free, but also ensure that there is accountability and justice for people who have been violated this way. They've already committed to setting up what is called the hybrid court for South Sudan, which will be a court bringing together South Sudanese and international judges and legal experts to try these cases and prosecute them within South Sudan, and to make sure that there is accountability. If that is done, and the African Union is also supposed to be involved in this process, they set up that court, and everyone who's been involved in grave human rights violations, in crimes against humanity, in war crimes, is brought to justice. Then you have a more like a bigger likelihood that the peace that they are seeking will actually be sustainable and last for a long time, because we've seen ceasefires violated and all of that. With justice, you can have sustainable peace. Without it, I don't think that is a possibility.
Well, thank you. Saif Magango, Amnesty International's Deputy Director for East Africa, the Horn and the Great Lakes. Thank you so much for making time. We'll definitely delve deeper into the developments happening in South Sudan, not just there, but across Africa. Thank you so much for making time.
Thank you so much for having me and for interesting report.
Well, we now move on. We take a look at picture of the day as well as the proverb of the day. This as we conclude Bottom Line Africa. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Jesse Rogers. We will definitely keep you updated on the pertinent issues surrounding the great motherland that is Africa. Have yourself a lovely day.